Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Hello and welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. If you are watching or listening to us and would like to watch the show again at no cost, you can do so by going to KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Their website is kgradb.com, and then go to the past live stream. They run the show for another 24 hours or so at no cost for viewers or listeners. Should you want to watch it again after that, the best way to do that is subscribe. And if you subscribe to KGRA and use my name, Peter, as your password, you will get 30% off. And that covers every one of the thousands of shows they have archived at KGRA. We are not, I should also say that most of my shows are available at no cost on YouTube. Just type in Meanwhile Here on Earth and up they come. I'm not going to have a monologue tonight. We have a special guest, a good friend of mine, and who is being a real trooper in that we could have pre-recorded the show, but he is going live. And in the UK, that means being on the air from midnight to 2 a.m. So special thanks there. Tonight's guest is Ralph Hall. Ralph was born in 1945 and joined the British military when he was 18. He served in the Army Air Corps as an engineer and aircrew member, during which time he spent 2.5 years on active service in Southeast Asia in the 1960s. Following his military service, he returned to Ireland, then moved to Canada in 1974. Traveling throughout Canada, he also spent considerable time in my neck of the woods, northern New York State, an area he fell in love with and still loves today. While in Canada, he became actively involved in UFO research and was a field investigator for APRO. That's the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization and kind of the forerunner of MUFON, Mutual UFO Research Organization Network. Ralph returned to the UK in 1984 and started his own business restoring vintage and historic aircraft. Many of his main customers were in the USA, and all the while, he became more deeply involved in UFO research. After 36 years, his business was brought to a crashing end when the COVID pandemic hit, basically trashing the commercial aviation world in the process. He and his dear wife, now both in their 70s, contracted and survived bad cases of COVID-19 early last year. And I am very thankful that you guys came through it as well as you did, Ralph. Following their recoveries, they picked up the pieces and moved to the west of Ireland to start a new chapter in their lives. And that is where Ralph is right now. Ralph is also an artist and a musician and has been a keen motorcyclist for many years, decades. He is a respected motorcycle racer for many years and has done extensive charity fundraising through his motorcycling efforts. He has also gifted much appreciated charity work to the Dutch Airborne Museum at Hartstein, Oosterbroek, near Arnhem. His musical heroes are Bob Dylan, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Bryan Adams, and North Ireland's most famous and talented motorcycle racer, the late Joey Dunlap, MBE, OBE, and last but not least, the great Kevin Schwantz from Texas, world champion motorcycle racer who Ralph had the privilege of spending time with some years ago. When asked who, of all the people he has ever met, that made the most impression on him, Ralph admits it is a lovely lady who sadly is no longer with us and who he was honored to spend a few days with. And that is the late and wonderful Betty Hill, somebody we all hold in great admiration. Ralph Hull, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's very nice to be here.
Ralph, you and I have been friends for some years, and one of the things for me about the world of UFO studies, we have our obsessions, our goals, our fascination with them. Who are they? Where do they come from? Why are they here? What are their aims for humanity? But in pragmatic terms, one thing that continues to impress upon me as the most centrally important real world day-to-day aspect of being involved in this field is people like you and I get to meet people that we would have never met otherwise. And you and I are two pretty good examples. Scale that up to a time when we hit a tipping point or a critical point when more and more people take the subject seriously and understand that it is real. And to quote General Twining's, not visionary or fictitious, it has a potential of bringing human beings closer together as a species than almost anything I can think of. I'd like to begin tonight, though, the way I often begin shows, to find out how you became the person that you are. So let's begin at the beginning. And I'm going to bring up this first image here. Who are these people?
That's my mom and dad, taken in the 40s.
And both Irish?
They're both Irish. My mother was from County Cavan in the south of Ireland, and my dad was from County Lisburn in the north of Ireland.
Can you tell us how they met?
Yeah, my dad was in the army during the war, and my mother was in England during the war. She worked funny enough, for the Ministry of Aircraft Production. And they met, I believe, in London.
Do you have any siblings?
I have one sister, my dear sister, Ruth, in Canada.
And you stay in touch with her, I hope?
Oh, yes, very much so. In fact, I think she's in Brampton, Ontario, listening to this program tonight, or watching the program.
Very good. If you are, greetings, Ruth. I hope it's not too cold where you are right now. It's getting colder here. Yeah. I'm going to come. This is where you went to primary school.
Yes, indeed. That picture was taken in the 90s, but the old school hasn't changed very much.
Ralph, can you tell us something about your childhood? Did you grow up in a city or the countryside?
I grew up in a very rural area, Peter. I guess I'm a country boy at heart, really. And yeah, it was quite a rural. I was probably a teenager before I got in your city, really.
At about what age did you actively start to become a reader?
Quite early on, actually. Probably, I don't know, seriously reading, I suppose, 7 or 8 years of age. My dad used to read to us because in those days the only entertainment was the radio. There were no televisions. And my father used to read to us of an evening time.
Obviously, you didn't grow up with the ubiquitous television set in your home.
Never did.
Not a bad thing.
It's a good thing, actually. Yeah.
Radio is almost an antiquarian word for some people. I was lucky enough to grow up at the very end of the radio age and still have some early childhood memories of some of the programs, Westerns, detective stories, soap operas, some of which went on to become television shows. What was radio a family activity, or was it something? What part did it play in your life?
Initially, not a lot, Peter, because radio was very limited. You had I think it was called the BBC Home Service at that time. And really, it was for a kid, it was pretty boring. Usually dry news reports and stuff like that. There was there was one program called Workers' Playtime, which as a teenager, again, or as a kid, it was very boring. Our highlight as children were trying to tune into Radio Luxembourg. Because they played what we called the forerunner of pop music at the time.
Yes.
And the only
BBC
problem
was not keen on pop music until a certain point.
Sorry?
The BBC was not very keen on programming pop music until a certain point in their development, when I guess they realized they better start doing it.
Yeah, they kind of frowned on that. And whenever Radio Caroline came out in the North Sea, the pirates on board the lightship, there were actually calls from some members of Parliament to torpedo the ship and all sorts of drastic things. Because they could see the country being ruined. The fabric of the country would be ruined by this pop music. Yeah. Yes,
it absolutely eats into the moral fabric of the Great British Empire, no question about it.
Absolutely.
For some of our viewers and listeners, this is like new information, but for me, it's a fascinating part of the history of popular culture and the history, basically, of UK popular culture. Especially in the 60s, there were ships that lay just outside of, the line of demarcation, so to say, that would broadcast all of the great new rock and roll. And again, in official circles, this was not popular. And life aboard the ships was pretty rock and roll itself in some cases. There are one or two movies that kind of captured, although the titles elude me right now. And
The Ship That Rocked, I believe, was one of them.
Yeah, I think Alan Rickman, the late great, was in one of them, if I remember correctly. I may be wrong. But back to reading. You said your dad read to you and your sisters. Were they... Obviously, at the very beginning, I'm imagining, they were children's books, but did he start to read to you from books that captured your imagination and kind of brought you more into the adult world of reading, or did you start that on your own?
I think he sort of eased us into the adult world of reading. I think the first book I remember him reading was The Wind in the Willows.
Ah.
Yeah. And that was a real success with us. And then he started reading later on some works by Dickens, Scrooge, and stuff like that.
Wow.
Then he introduced me to Westerns, because he was a great reader of Western novels. So I ended up reading most of the Zane Grey and J.T. Edson novels. Yeah. Then I went from that to, mystery novels. So yeah, I had a pretty broad spectrum of reading, Peter.
When did you live near a village or in a village?
We lived on the outskirts of a village.
Okay.
I walked about a mile to school in the mornings.
Did they have a film, a theater in town?
No. What would happen is that they had a village hall, and on a Saturday night, a guy would show up from the nearest city or the nearest settlement with a little Ford van, and on the roof of this Ford van was a rolled up film screen And this would be rolled out in the village hall, and the projector would be whirring away, and we'd come and see some black and white movies.
I love it.
I remember seeing a Frankenstein movie and running all the way there. This creature was actually, we took it very serious as kids.
A very powerful film. A very powerful film, especially in simpler times.
That's correct. Yeah.
I have to jump in here. My father, who we've certainly talked about, who wrote his memoir starting when he was 95 years old. And it's quite a damn good memoir, I think. He shared memories of when he was 12 or so in the year the film came out, 1931, that he went to see it on his own in the afternoon, and he got out and it was already getting dark.
Oh, dear.
And he had to walk a good distance home. And he said, do you remember in the great Walt Disney movie, the cartoon movie Fantasia, how the trees come to life? I said, yeah. He said, every tree, absolutely terrified. Do you remember any of the other films that you saw? And did you always go on your own, or did you go as a family sometimes?
No, I usually went with, usually on my own. I saw that, and that would have been, I'm thinking of dates now, that would have been the late 50s, early 60s. There was lots of how shall we say, stirring movies about war heroes and stuff like that, because the Second World War had just ended. So we had loads of sort of adventure stories about that, and adventure films. There was one famous one called the Cockleshell Heroes, about people who went into behind enemy lines and planted limpet mines on submarines and boats and things like that.
Yeah. No.
Then there was famous air battle movies like Battle of Britain and stuff like that. Depict aerial combat.
The world of British film, Ealing Studios, and so many of the great directors, wonderful actors, is unfortunately not as well known to Americans unless they're film maniacs like me. So there was certainly plenty of great British films to be shown, in the format that you're talking about. Do you remember in childhood whether or not they screened any overtly American films?
Well, there was lots of American musicals coming along. In fact, I was sitting watching some musicals this afternoon with my wife.
Like Singing in the Rain, or?
Yeah, exactly. We were actually watching that this afternoon. She's a big fan of Fred Astaire.
Oh, well, who isn't?
So I'm well versed in Fred Astaire.
A lot of people get through the Depression with some wonderful escapism.
Indeed. And like as regards American movies, well, I was a big John Wayne fan and watched most of the John Wayne movies. And I was a fan of the Lone Ranger and the Cisco Kid. All that stuff was coming out of the States to us then in those days.
So your first awarenesses as a young person about this place called America came from the Westerns that your father read and that you read, and from, the film world. However, you're growing up in Ireland, and God knows the relationship between Ireland and England has been, to be kind, contentious.
Yes.
For about 800 years or so by the time you're born.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember your earliest memories of beginning to understand that there was this real difference, and that it was not a happy difference, between the relationship between these two countries, one of which dominated the other one.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you when that started, Peter, because it was always a part of life.
Yes.
And kids don't pay attention to that sort of thing,
Right. They're kids.
Because kids will play together, and division and strife is pretty foreign to children, really.
Yes.
Children in the purest sense, before they're contaminated, shall we say,
Yes.
by ideas. Now, my mother was from the south of Ireland. My father was from the north of Ireland. The north of Ireland was British, and the south of Ireland belonged to the Republic of Ireland.
Yes.
In theory, they were diametrically opposed places.
Yeah.
But they got on very well. And there was never any mention in our house of any form of sedition, division, or hatred. Although the area of Northern Ireland where I kind of grew up was what you would call a loyalist area.
Yes.
And at times my mother was sniped at, I don't mean literally, but verbally, because she came from the south of Ireland. So I think politics is a very divisive thing, Peter, because there was politicians from all over who were actually making a living by basically having people have a go at each other. Like in Northern Ireland, you had the two communities. You had basically the Protestant community and the Catholic community. In those days, Peter, no one had any inside track to anything. Most of those people were all quite poor, and they were all working class people striving to make a living. They were all living in similar homes. But somehow this division was being encouraged.
Yeah.
And it resulted in some real awful tragedies. Incredibly divisive. My hope for the future is that, I see hope for the future because young people today are not quite as influenced, I don't think anywhere near, like the kids were back then.
Yes.
Because naturally you did what your father did back then. In fact, it was expected of you to keep up the family tradition, as it were.
Yes.
If you hated one group of people, well, then you were supposed to hate them, your brother was supposed to hate them, whatever. Dreadfully tragic.
Were you raised as Catholic or Protestant, and were both of your parents of one religion or one of each?
Now, both my parents were the same religion. They were Protestant. When I was raised, I used to go to Methodist church. Actually, it's really funny because religion played a great part in those days in Ireland. It doesn't have the hold on people now that it did.
That's right.
Like my Sundays I hated Sundays, Peter. I utterly detested Sunday. Sunday morning I would be off to Sunday school, scrubbed and bright and bushy-tailed. Then immediately after Sunday school, I would be going to the church service. Then back after the service near midday, have the same roast dinner every Sunday for forever. You weren't allowed to change out your good clothes because there was another service in the afternoon at 3:00.
Gosh.
And then you went to the service at 6:00 at night. Now, to any kid, that's boring. Sorry, there's nothing fun about that. Not at all.
I think even Jesus would agree.
Jesus he probably deserted the place by 6:00 at night. It was honestly, but that's what life was like. And that's how it was.
Yeah. At a certain point, as you're becoming an adolescent, you start to have an appreciation that at some point you are going to become what we would refer to as an adult or a grown-up. And adults and grown-ups, your dad, your parents, the parents of your friends. More often than not, back then, mothers were full-time mothers, but not always. But fathers did things to pay the bills and either had a job or a career. Do you remember when you first started to think about what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I did. I wanted to join the military. I grew up in an era when there was literally thousands of men who were all ex-soldiers, ex-airmen. And I thought it was a very honorable thing that these guys had done,
Yes.
even as So my dad was ex-army. His folks were ex-military. There was a long line of them. Sadly, his father was killed in the Battle of the Somme in 1916. His brother was killed in Burma. I thought it was the thing to do was to join the military, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yes. I'm imagining also that had you chosen an academic life, your folks did not have the means to send you to university, for example.
Oh, you've hit the nail right on the head, because there was a thing, the education system in the UK then was kids set what was called the 11 plus exam. That was when you were 11 years of age. And the outcome of that exam determined whether you were going to go on to a high school education and carry on to university, or go to a technical school. And I remember sitting the 11 plus exam and passing it with flying colors. And I thought, oh, whoopee, And then my parents sat me down, God bless them, and explained that they didn't have the money for me to go to high school. They couldn't afford uniforms. They couldn't afford the sports gear.
Yeah.
None of that. So would I consider going to technical college, which is what I did. I didn't feel deprived or anything about it. It was a bit of a disappointment. But when you're young, you get over stuff easier.
Yes.
And yeah, I was quite happy at tech school and enjoyed it and learned a lot of good things.
What did you study there, Ralph?
I did engineering, drawing, woodwork, French, mathematics, basically. That was about it. And then after I left school, I went and I first off wanted to join the Royal Air Force. And I passed again all the exams to go in the Air Force. And my mother wouldn't sign the papers because I was still underage.
Ah.
I had to have parental consent, you see.
Sure.
And sadly, a year later, my mother passed away.
Ah.
She passed away when I was quite young. And so, yeah, I was free to go in the Royal Air Force. The trouble was I had missed the slot for joining. And I was another year older. And they wouldn't take me then as an apprentice. So I thought, well, what can I do here? And I thought, well, I love airplanes. I'm still hooked on aircraft. So
yeah.
I found out that the Army had an aviation wing.
Yes.
And I thought, right, that's what I shall do. I shall join the Army, learn to be a foot-slogging soldier, but hopefully get in the aviation business in the Army. So that's what I did. Yeah.
So you enlisted at 18 and
yes.
You went through a basic training. Can I ask where that took place?
Yes, that took place at a place called Arborfield in Berkshire, in England.
Was that your first trip to England?
My first trip to England, that was it. It was very strange because in school we were told in Ireland, look, if you're going to go anywhere, you you got to study real hard because the English are all more clever than you are. No, seriously.
Wow.
And they'll laugh at you when you go out. You'll get nowhere. You have to be better than them, really. So we worked very hard at school. It was a very serious business, our education. And I well remember going to England by myself when I joined the army. And you got a ticket to go on the boat from Ireland to England and a pass to get on a train. And all the language seemed strange. And it was a different culture altogether.
Yes.
And I thought, my goodness, what have I let myself in for here? And will these people laugh at me, really? Yeah. Anyway, I ended up in a training platoon with 34 or 36 guys, and they were from everywhere. There was Irish guys, there was English guys, Scottish, Welsh. And I soon found out that nobody was smarter than anybody else, Peter. We're all stupid little so-and-sos of 18 years of age. And we did stupid things that 18-year-olds do. And although we thought we were men, we didn't really know that much.
Yeah.
The good thing, Peter, was all our instructors were mature people, and they were tough. But I tell you what, they're really, really good people. They were almost like fathers to us.
Wonderful.
They taught us confidence. They taught us respect for other people, and above all, confidence in ourselves. And the one lesson that the army taught me, which I'm grateful for, Peter, because it has been a salvation over the years, is it never to quit. Never give up. The army wasn't looking for super soldiers. The army still isn't looking for super soldiers, Peter. They're looking for individuals who are tenacious and will not quit. So when times get bad, you don't stick your hands in your pockets and say, that's too difficult, I'm off hope. And it's a great lesson to learn.
It's an extraordinary thing to confer on somebody, to give them that, that skill, that gift, that understanding about themselves, that pride in self, and coming from the point of view that I can get this done. I can solve this problem. I can resolve this situation.
Yeah.
And when I posted this photo online to let people know that you would be my guest, one respondent says, he looks like a young Burt Lancaster. And let's face it, you are one strikingly handsome guy. Jesus. When was this taken?
That was taken in Borneo in 1965, I believe.
Wow. And your first posting, you complete your basic training, and are you shipped out immediately or stationed in England or Ireland, or you're off to the Southeast Asia?
I was stationed I finished my training in England, and then I was posted to Germany. And I was in a place called Herford in Germany. It's really funny because in those days, Germany I didn't like Germany at that time.
Sure.
There was an awful lot of tension around after the war.
Understandably.
It wasn't a happy place to be.
Yeah.
For me anyway. And I actually volunteered to go to Southeast Asia to get out of Germany. They were actually calling for volunteers to go to Borneo. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll have a go at this. And then realized when I got there that people were shooting at each other. And I thought, well, maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all. But I was there for 2.5 years anyway.
2.5 years in Borneo?
Yeah.
And who was shooting at whom?
Well, it's very complicated, Peter. It's like everything to do with politics, my friend. President Sukarno was president of Indonesia.
Indonesia, right.
Now, at that time, you had Vietnam going on.
Yes, just beginning to really heat up.
Yeah, Cambodia, Laos, trouble on the Thai border. So that whole line of countries, north to south, right to Borneo was the most southern point. There was conflict.
Yeah.
And it was a confrontation between so-called Chinese guerrillas, the Indonesian army in our case, and the Commonwealth forces. In Vietnam, you had the American forces, backed up by some Australians. And in Malaysia, and well, it was Malaya in those days. Yeah. In Borneo, you had the Brits and the New Zealanders. I was in what they call 20th Commonwealth Brigade. It was made up from Commonwealth countries. And we were supposedly fighting Chinese guerrillas. But I found out only a couple of weeks ago, which I found quite shocking, that the Brits had a special office in Singapore during that time where they were conducting PSYOPs operations. And they were creating all kinds of mayhem because the confrontation with Indonesia started because the Indonesians, Borneo, half of it's Indonesia and the other half belonged to Malaya. And the Indonesians, I think they objected to the sort of Commonwealth or colonial expansionism, which they could see taking over everything. So they fought back. And he originally had been a kind of a forerunner of the equivalent of Saddam Hussein for the Western forces, Sukarno.
Yes.
And then they kind of turned on him like they did with Saddam Hussein, really. And he was replaced by a real puppet called Suharto, who created dreadful crimes. I think there was about 300,000 Chinese people or Chinese guerrilla type people who were actually ended up being killed in Indonesia. It was pretty awful sort of thing. So that's what we were in the middle of.
Got it.
And we thought we were doing something worthwhile, but I don't know, maybe we were working for British Petroleum or Shell Borneo or people like that, because there was a lot of resources there, Peter.
So you were generally behind the lines working on aircraft, or did you see action while you were there as well and get shot at?
Oh, I got shot at a few times. That was kind of par for the course,
Yeah.
Nobody met the mark, so I was unscathed, really.
Tell us about this photograph.
Well, the big twin rotor helicopter, I was actually in that one at the time. We were bringing the small Bell 47 back. Anybody who watches the famous and wonderful series MASH will recognize the little helicopter suspended below the large one, because in the series of MASH, that was the type of helicopters were shown at the front, and they're
right
at the start of the movie, where Alan Alda would be going and getting casualties from out of the stretchers.
Yeah.
We also had those in Borneo, those choppers, and that was one type we had, and that one had come to grief somewhere and was being brought back for repair.
And generally, what was your relationship with these helicopters?
Well, I fixed them, worked on them, serviced them, and did aircrew duty in them as well. Went flying as observers and gunners and stuff like that.
Got it. And who is this gentleman?
That's me. Standing beside another salvaged wreck.
I was going to say, we have a little problem with that aircraft at the moment.
A little bit. He had an engine failure, and he was over primary jungle. Most of the flying out there, Peter, was over heavy, thick jungle.
Yeah.
he was very, very fortunate to find a patch of bamboo to put that thing into. He had, I think, three other people on board, and but then we went on to repair that, and I went on to fly quite a lot in that particular airplane after it was repaired.
Amazing. And this aircraft here, are we? In fact, let me hold off on that one for a moment. Obviously, in a very different period of time. Borneo was of strategic importance for, the Commonwealth countries at this period of time. But Borneo also was the home of not just tribal people, but literally Stone Age people. And one of those tribes was the Iban. Do I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
The Iban, in popular culture, they were headhunters. And this was something as a kid, like a lot of boys, and maybe some girls too, that fascinated me in a very dark way, that in battle, you would take the head of an enemy. As an adult, I continued to study it. And one of the things I learned was like the Osmat, the people to whom we feel that Michael Rockefeller, a young anthropologist who is the son of Nelson Rockefeller, the youngest of the Rockefeller brothers, a governor of New York State and a vice president at one point, that he was taken and killed ritually, in part because he came into a situation where a cycle of violence that had gone on for millennia between certain tribes, this is in the very early 60s, suddenly involved the Dutch, who had a presence, of course, in that part of the world, that some Dutch paramilitary person had killed a tribal person. And it went on, from my understanding, to have a very almost enlightened sense of how they carried on war. They didn't come together and murder each other wholesale like we do in the West. You would go to another village and kill someone. And ideally, for you, take their head. They would respond by maybe coming into your village at night and killing one person in response. And so it went, that cycle of retribution, an eye for an eye. But it never escalated into huge warring factions coming together. You spent some time with the Iban people, these headhunter people. Can you share what that was like and what your awareness was going in, and how it either was confirmed or you learned things that you had not expected about these tribal people?
Yes. The British, when they went into Borneo, they carried out a campaign which was called Hearts and Minds. And what that basically was being friendly to the local population. So they encouraged the indigenous people, and with like all kinds of stuff, medical and famine relief. Oh, not famine relief, because I never saw anybody starving there, but disaster relief if it was bad weather or anything like that. All kinds of medical and hospital facilities, schools. So there was a big push to have these people as your friends rather than as your enemies. And in fact, some of the Ibans actually ended up working for the British Army. And I will tell you this, and this is true. Iban trackers would go out to wreak havoc in the jungle with the Indonesians who were coming over. And you would see an Iban tracker, and he's a little guy, he'd only be hardly 5 foot, tattooed from head to toe, even his throat, everything tattooed. And he would be in the camp. The old camp we were in Kuching was a bit like the same old camp that you got in MASH. MASH is one of my favorites because it's very well depicted for that era. And you'd see these guys, and they'd have they'd be wearing a jungle green uniform supplied by the army, and they would have with them a big black Labrador tracker dog and a huge pack on their back, and maybe a sawn-off shotgun. And these guys would go out into the jungle singly, and they'd come back a week or two later and get paid for their services when they'd been out. And the way they got paid, and this may sound very horrendous to some people, they got paid for how many years they brought back. So when they killed a Indonesian so-called terrorist, they'd take his ears off. And wow. These guys got paid so much per year. People would say to me, "Oh, you're making this up," but I'm not. That's how it worked.
Yeah.
Apart from that, the Ibans, I found them to be really nice people, friendly to a fault, generous to a fault. Until we had gone in there, they never used money. They used barter system.
Sure.
And I personally got on very well with the Mam and the Dayak folk. But then as I say, I foolishly went out there and found people shooting at each other. I didn't actually go out to try and hurt anyone or kill anyone. So I was quite happy getting along with folks and making friends with these people. Yeah. And I knew some Iban chaps that were maybe a little older than me. There was 4 of them in particular that I knew. And I remember the day I left to come home out of Borneo, they actually stood and cried that we were saying goodbye. And subsequently, in the years that's gone by, Peter, I often wonder how those people fared, because our way of life is so alien to what they lived.
Yeah.
Almost those folks were really, I don't want to sound corny, but almost like Garden of Eden, where it was. Yeah. It was Borneo was all primary jungle. Yeah. There was no huge amounts of roads or anything. Yeah. It was a very inhospitable place to go flying helicopters in. And now it's nearly denuded to grow for palm oil plantations and stuff like that. The forests have been cut down to make shuttering ply so as the Japanese can pour concrete, The rivers have puked so much silt from the deforestation into the sea that, it's polluting the waters. So I do wonder how they got along, bless them.
Yeah. What we in the West call progress is often just the opposite in a primary society like this. And we have this turned around notion that we are bringing them the benefits of, Western technology and philosophy, when in reality, it can cause their entire social structure to melt down and then become a myth.
Yes, my friend. And the other thing is that, you hear that they're, I don't know, bringing enlightenment to the savages, and I'm nearly ashamed to say that. But you know what? We're the savages. We're the ones that's being savage. Because, okay, the Ibans took heads, but as you rightly pointed out, it wasn't an everyday occurrence. There had to be some motivation and there had to be something pretty serious to go and get ahead. we take heads all the time in our society, in every aspect that you can think of, and we do it viciously.
Yes.
And in many cases, because we can, and those people didn't. I found them to be quite gentle people. And that makes me sad because, as you say, we think we're doing great things and we're educating people and we're doing this and we're doing that, and we're really destroying our environment. And we're destroying their...
And Ralph, you were stationed there for 2.5 years. Was that straight through, or did you have opportunities to go on furlough and return home to Ireland to see your family?
Oh, God, I never got home to see my family. No.
2.5 years.
Yeah, the best I got was 3 months back in Malaya on the mainland, and
Wow.
would fly back for say 3 months rest and recuperation, and then we'd go back in again.
Whew. That had to change you in some profound way.
Peter, that changed me for life.
Yeah.
It just changed my whole outlook on life. It's something I think is very important, especially it's in your country now, is that the plight of veterans. Because I could never look on the world again after being in there for 2.5 years. And I understand exactly what happens to young men when they came out of Vietnam, they come out of Afghanistan, places where they never should have been in the first place.
Yes.
And they come home shattered. And they can't deal with it. They can't understand it. Because what you go through in a place like that is so different from any normality that people know in civilian life.
Yes.
So when you get back to civilian life and you find, well, to put it quite bluntly, in the military, you're relying on your mates, your comrades, and they've got your back and you've got their back. And if you don't do your job, one of them will die. And if they don't do their job, you will die. When you come into civilian street and you find that nobody really cares, they promise you things, they do things, and then they break their word, and it doesn't really matter. The truth is twisted. Promises are broken. You find that incredibly hard to deal with if you've been in a war zone for a couple of years.
Ralph, you were born in 1945. The official commencement of what we have come to term the modern age of UFOs begins in the summer of 1947. Up until this point in your life, growing up or in the military, had you ever given much or any thought to this phenomena, originally commonly termed flying saucers or unidentified aerial phenomena? And then in 1956 or so, the term UFO came into being. Was this something that at this point in your life you had given any thought to?
I didn't when I was in the military because I was too busy keeping my head down to think anything esoteric in any way at all. It was discussed, I remember, when I was a teenager in Ireland. I remember neighbours in talking with mum and dad, and there was always talk about the possibility of life on other planets or things that were maybe seen in the sky. But I didn't get actively involved until basically the 70s. Well, I didn't know the history. I didn't know about Roswell or anything like that.
Sure.
Until the early 70s. So I would imagine I came out of the military in 1969 and came back to Ireland for a short time. Well, of course, all the violence was kicking off in Ireland at that time, so
The
that
troubles,
wasn't really
yeah.
a fun place to be. And I went to Canada in 1974, and it was in Canada that I really started to hear and learn about these things. And then I just couldn't get enough of it. I was just intrigued by it totally.
When you left for Canada, was your dad still with us?
Yes, he was. He lived for another 3 years after I'd come to Canada. It's kind of sad in a way because my wife at the time and I, we got a place in Nova Scotia. And we got a place that was big enough that could have a granddad annex for my dad.
Sure.
And we wanted him to come. And he was going to hang on until he retired. He was going to do a stint. And bless him, a year after he retired, he was dead, which happens to so many men.
Yes. Ironically, this is as good a place as any to let our viewers and listeners know that they are watching and listening to Meanwhile Here on Earth with Peter Robbins and my special guest tonight, my dear friend Ralph Hull in Ireland. And we will be back in 3 or 4 minutes. Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA-DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA-DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA-DB.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
And welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with Peter Robbins and my guest tonight, Ralph Hull. Ralph, we left off with you in Ireland, having returned from service in Southeast Asia, 2.5 years away. Well, 2.5 years long without being home. How long were you in Ireland before you and your first wife decided to strike off for a new life in Canada?
About 2 years. We'd come back to Ireland from the UK because she was originally from the UK, and we came back to Ireland 72, I believe, and 2 years later we were in Canada.
Okay. Bill, would you bring Ralph back on camera? Thank you, sir. Did you know what you wanted to do, or did you have an opportunity, already waiting for you when you arrived?
I had an opportunity waiting for me. I got recruited by Rolls-Royce. They desperately needed engine technicians for aircraft engines, and they had Yes, I was, and they had a big facility in Montreal. So I applied for a job they were advertising in Belfast, where we were living at the time. And I went to the Canadian Embassy for an interview and came out with the job. And
I'm guessing a lot of our viewers and listeners were not aware that not only has Rolls-Royce a long and distinguished history in terms of aircraft engines, but not surprisingly, they have a history of making some of the finest ones in flight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're pretty reliable engines.
I guess. How long did you work for them?
I worked for them for a couple of years before I branched out and went seeking adventure in Nova Scotia, and worked on bush planes and dragged wrecked bush planes out of the bush and rebuilt them, and ran a little sheet metal shop down there for a while, and until such times as I went to Western Canada to work for an airline. And that was Canadian Pacific Airlines. They were headquarters from Vancouver.
Oh, sure.
And I worked as an engineer for them until I came back in 84, back to the UK.
And I'm going to bring up the next photo here. Tell me if we're about what year we are here compared to where we are in your narrative.
We are here that's me and my daughter. Stood beside a Beech King Air of the United States Air Force. Maybe it's US Navy, I'm not sure. At an air show in England. That would be about very early 90s.
Okay. At some point, you decided to make your way into New York State. Was that looking for new opportunities for work, or had you thought just take a break from my life in Canada? What brought you here?
A camping trip to the Adirondacks started it all. And we drove down from Montreal and ended up at Lake Placid. And the beautiful KOA campground there at Wilmington near Lake Placid. Mm. And that became one of our favorite spots in the whole world. And most weekends you would find us in Lake Placid area and Whitefish Mountain, stuff like that.
Sure.
And so I was very much a tourist in so much as, I still lived in Canada, but spent an awful lot of time in that area. And then after I actually come back to the UK and was involved with the restoration of vintage aircraft.
Let's talk about that a bit. There is a romance to vintage aircraft for a lot of us. They evoke a simpler time, nobler values. I remember as a boy, like so many boys, and again, I guess some girls, one of my passions was making model airplanes. And, you absorb a certain amount of history doing it, even when you're small. And my favorites were, of course, the World War I planes, which were terribly romantic and seemed so arcane and old-fashioned. And, the extra wing and knowing that they went so slow but were so maneuverable. But come the beginning of my 11 years old or so when I started to have a broader sense of history and of World War II, our dads being veterans of it. The Spitfire and the Hurricane, and learning about the Battle of Britain, and these two incredibly elegantly, simply designed planes, what they were capable of and what they assisted in doing in at least holding the Nazis at bay. What kind of vintage aircraft did you work on restoring?
I spent nearly 30 years restoring Spitfires.
Amazing.
My best customer was a gentleman from Florida. I think I built 3 Spitfires for him, or restored 3 Spitfires for him.
Nice hobby.
Well, it was my bread and butter. It wasn't a hobby.
No, I know, not for you, but for somebody of means who, gee, I love these vintage planes and I think I'll collect them.
Yeah. I think he did about the world's 6th largest air force. A gentleman called Mr. Weeks, Kermit Weeks, very famous in the United States. And I did a lot of work for Kermit for many years. And he built a beautiful facility at Polk City in Florida called the Fantasy of Flight. Very impressive. And he designed his whole building and his headquarters and his offices around the Pan Am headquarters in New York, where people used to go on the Clipper flying boats and all that sort of stuff in the 30s, 40s.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
He designed his whole facility based on that, and it was very, very beautiful. Loads and loads of art deco, were everything.
Class operation.
I had a grand and very nice relationship with Mr. Weeks for many years.
So at this point in your life, where are you working from? Where is your, I guess, the equivalent of a garage? I don't know, your hangar, your workshop where you are doing this work.
That was in Norfolk. That was not far from Norwich. And spent most of the time there doing that work. Nearly all the time I was doing it.
Now, we know, after the fact, that is a part of the United Kingdom in the southeastern corner there that has quite a history of UFO and paranormal activity. Was that anything that you were even peripherally aware of at that time?
Oh, yes. You see, I was well steeped in the UFO tradition and literature by then, because that's
okay. Then let me cut you off for a moment and ask that we go back to that point in your life when this subject came into your transom, when it first began to interest you, when you realized it was important, when you started to study it. What was the impetus for that, Ralph?
Listening to workmates in Rolls-Royce, funny enough, in Montreal, because some of them had friends and family who lived quite rural, out of Montreal, outside of the Montreal Island, some of whom were farmers, and they'd had some really weird sightings and weird experiences. And that's what got me hooked. That's what got me interested. And I heard these stories and I thought, my goodness. And I wanted to learn more, and I didn't know where to learn more, because there wasn't a lot of literature then that was publicized. So that's where that came in. And then after I went to Nova Scotia, I got really involved. That's when I joined APRO, and I was a field investigator for them in Eastern Canada. And that's where I had the wonderful privilege of meeting Betty Hill.
For the few viewers and listeners who are not aware of Betty Hill's name, she was, she and her husband Barney experienced a UFO abduction in New Hampshire in the White Mountains, coming back from a holiday in the Niagara Falls area in 1961. The information did not become generally public until 1965, but then kind of a feeding frenzy exploded around them. Ultimately, I think it's fair to say that their experience is one of the best documented in the annals of UFO studies. And Barney, who the stress involved, I think, contributed to a fairly early death. Betty, of course, was with us for many years after. It was also my privilege to know her to a degree. And of course, her niece, Kathleen Marden, has gone on to become one of our world-ranking authorities and knowledgeable figures on the so-called UFO abduction phenomenon. Have you yourself had sightings, experiences, as opposed to just an intellectual curiosity that has driven your interest in this field?
Yes, I have.
You're up for talking about any of that?
Oh, yes, I'm quite happy to talk about it. My first sighting was actually in Nova Scotia. And it was quite close, actually, about 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was my dog woke me up. And it was really weird how this happened, because most times you're not expecting these things to happen.
Yeah.
This comes out of the blue. And I lived in a little town called Westville in Nova Scotia. And this was, what was it, 70, 76, 70, 77. And believe it or not, even back then, there was somebody, we had a spate of gasoline being stolen from vehicles. And my car sat on the driveway, and I thought, well, I don't want gasoline stolen because there's been a lot of fuel been thieved. So I put up a steel run, a wire, going over from the back kitchen door to the barn that was across the way, where my dog could be clipped on at night. And I had a bed for him at the porch, so as he could be okay. It was in summertime. And he was right by the car. So if anyone had come to take gasoline out of the car, they would have had to contend with my little dog, who was a part husky and part Malamute. So he wasn't somebody you'd mess with, really. And I went to bed and woke up, and the dog was making this incredible noise. I thought it had caught somebody and was actually eating them. I'd never heard my dog make noises like it. And it was a hot night. It was June, I believe. And I threw open, well, the window was open. It was just a fly screen over the bedroom window. And I couldn't see the dog. He wasn't by the car. He wasn't near the car, but he was making these dreadful noises. And then he started whimpering and whining. And all of a sudden, silently from behind me over the top of the house, came this huge glowing craft, and flying totally silent. It was like flying in almost like a falling leaf motion, but like a cork in the water. Yeah. And it was lit up like Close Encounters, really. It really was. Huge strobe lights going off. It was surrounded by haze. So I'm there rubbing my eyes.
What an introduction.
Yeah, I thought, my God, this is, I've only been reading about these things. I've never seen one. And I'm yelling at my wife to get up quickly and have a look, which she did. And we watched it disappear toward the eastwards, toward the sea. And as it was receding, there was this flash, and there was this like silver sphere or ball flew out of it and headed off south at very high speed.
Oh my gosh.
And we watched it till it disappeared. And ironically enough, 3 months later, I saw two identical craft at another location where I was actually carrying out an investigation. And I saw that about 3 o'clock in the morning. So that was my kind of introduction in Atlantic Canada to the UFO scene.
Well, obviously people have shared a lot of accounts with people like you and I. It's very rare in my experience that somebody who is now in the field and, well, to be kind, better trained in the identification and hands-on knowledge about aircraft to have a full, 9 yards bells and whistles experience like this, as opposed to, a light in the night sky or something much more ambiguous. Was it disc shaped, or did it have a discernible shape?
Yes, it did, Peter. I was looking at it from underneath. So it had a disc shape. It was quite dark gray, seemed to me, on the bottom, but the top was glowing. It put me in mind of if you had a campfire, and whenever the ashes are starting to die down, how the wind actually fans the ashes and you get an orange glow.
Mm.
And the whole center of it was pulsating like that. And then there was red lights running around the rim, interspersed with huge strobe lights like you get on the wings of an aircraft, but much, much larger and much brighter. And it was just quite an astounding thing to look at. It was certainly structured craft. There's no question about it.
That your initial sighting and then the follow-up sighting with 2 discernible objects. You were with APRO at the time, or APRO. Did you write them up as a report the same way you would as an investigator working with somebody else?
Yes, I did. And I sent copies of that to APRO. They went to East Kleindale Road, Tucson, Arizona. I remember the address still.
Yeah.
Jim and Carl Lorenzen. Yeah.
The best.
Yeah. And
very ahead of their time.
That's right. And in actual fact, I sent a summary of that report some years ago to Kathleen Marden. Out of courtesy, I'd told her about some sightings we'd had in Nova Scotia, and I just sent her an account of some of those.
Wow.
That's some years ago. So yes, it was written up and it's documented, and it's probably in the annals of APRO somewhere, that report.
No doubt. No doubt. There's very little more for an investigator to fire them up if you already weren't, than having the kind of experience you had. Did that change the nature of doing this work for you, or kind of supercharge it in some way, or it was just kind of a quiet stepping through a door and realizing you were at the next level of this was no longer, something that you intellectually entertained and accept as a phenomena, but as some would say, you no longer have the luxury of disbelief?
Oh no, I really got into this at the start because I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to find out for myself what I could to see what was true and what was not. And as I say, there wasn't a great deal of literature. So this experience was like earth-shattering for me, and it did supercharge me, and it led me off down paths that I never would have explored otherwise.
Yes.
And it's led me a torturous path ever since, but that's life.
Did you have yet another experience or sighting after that in that time period, or did that transpire at a later date?
You mean after I saw the two craft again?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw those in accompaniment with a number of witnesses, so it wasn't just me saying those things.
Good.
I was leaving the property in eastern Nova Scotia at that time of the morning when the sighting occurred. And I was with the owner of the property, and there was a car set with 4 guys in it who had been out hoping to see something, and they were pretty well nearly asleep in the car, but because we were walking, me and the property owner, outside we saw these things. And one of the chaps, I spoke to him in the car and he had a huge pair of binoculars. And I said, can I borrow your binoculars? And looked at these things. And sure enough, I could see with my naked eye what they were, but the binoculars confirmed that they were the exact same things we'd seen before, or I'd seen before. And I didn't say a word. I handed the binoculars back to the chap. I said, tell me what you see.
Oh.
And he was, my God, he said, that's spinning. Those things are spinning. And I said, yeah. And the other chaps in the car had a look and expressed their amazement. One guy wanted to head off home right away. He said, let's get out of here. But the others voted him down on that, so they stayed. And these things finally disappeared by going up in the sky, Peter, and receding just like a star. They stopped flashing, the strobe lights went off, and they were indistinguishable from the background stars at the end.
Yeah, that's the way it is sometimes.
So, yeah, it was quite interesting, quite dramatic.
Now, going back to a very terrestrial reality.
Bless you. I've forgotten I sent you this. That is Ziggy. And Ziggy was my best mate for 21 years.
Oh my gosh, what a long cat life.
Yes, he was. I got him as a rescue cat.
Ah.
And we had a wonderful relationship. I cried my eyes out when I lost him.
Yep. They are, for people like us, I can't say enough about how much I love cats. And my experience with cats, orange tiger cats, especially male orange tiger cats, are kind of a reality unto themselves. They're the most dog-like cat, and I mean that in the best sense of the word. They are loyal. They will walk with you. They are total buddies and will hang and have an incredibly high tolerance for, children poking at them and pulling their ears. They are very affectionate, very loving, smart as hell. And 21 years, kinahara, as we say in Yiddish. That's a long, good life for a cat.
It is. He was loved and looked after.
And was this, technically speaking, a Canadian cat, a English cat, or an Irish cat?
He was an English cat. He was, as I say, I got him in a rescue center, and it was kind of sad. He had belonged to a little girl in a family, and apparently they'd had to move home. And wherever they moved to, they weren't allowed to have animals.
Oh boy!
So he went in a shelter, and
how terrifying and disorienting that must be for an intelligent creature like that, and how fortunate you two were to find each other.
Yeah, it was really funny because I went to this rescue place to get a cat. I just felt the need. I'd just gone through a separation with my marriage and stuff, and I'd gotten this beautiful little cottage I'd done up in the country to try and lick my wounds and start a life again. And I thought, I need a cat. So I went to the rescue center and I saw a lady, Debbie, and she brought me into this compound where they had a huge room, which was made like a sort of pseudo huge living room with furniture and all kinds around and dozens of cats. So I was surrounded by all these gorgeous little kittens and all kinds of creatures, sort of take me. And
easy.
Debbie said to me, the lady, she said, come and see Ziggy. And Ziggy was obviously, he was a couple of years of age. And he was sitting there looking very quiet and grumpy and sad. And I thought, oh, he's beautiful. And I went over and talked to him and stroked him. And she said, you are honored, she said, because anyone else who touches him, he attacks them. I said, well, in that case, Ziggy and I are mates.
Oh, that's
And
beautiful, man.
yes, and the funny thing, Peter, is I didn't have any money with me because I had to pay for, there was, I think it was a £30 fee or something for a rescue cat.
Sure.
So I'll tell you what, I said, I'll just go to the bank and the hole in the wall, the cash dispenser, get some money and I'll be right back. And she said, yeah, and I'll loan you a basket. So when I went to the bank and I was gone for half an hour and I drove back into the yard and that cat saw me drive into the yard, and this is absolute gospel. He stood up as soon as I got out of the car. And she came with the case and he walked straight in the carrying case. Cat basket.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
The rest was history, Peter. A wonderful animal.
That's beautiful.
So thank you for showing Ziggy to the world. He was a lovely creature.
Well, cats are my favorite animals, and those of us that are fortunate enough to have them in our lives know that we make believe that we have a cat, but in reality, the cat has a human, and we are under their control doing whatever they want. My office assistant is right here, right now, making sure that I run the show right.
Absolutely.
Tell us about this photo.
Oh, it's just a couple of reprobates I saw on the road somewhere.
One can slightly date the photo from that very mean-looking muscle car behind them.
A 67 Barracuda.
Whoa.
And that was me and my dad, because that was bless him, that was a year before he died. We had brought him out to Canada for a holiday.
Outstanding.
And we'd been out messing around in the old Barracuda somewhere. And I think my wife at the time took that picture of the pair of us.
Looking good.
He really enjoyed his trip. That was my Chevy Blazer. Because I've got a real passion about American motors.
Yes. And one can see we have, looks like, is that a New York State plate along with a British plate?
Yes, it is. I always made sure I had a U.S. license plate on my car as well, just to confuse the local law enforcement.
Well, in case there's some time coordinate thing where you're sucked into a wormhole and end up 5,000 miles away, you're covered.
Yeah.
They're getting bigger.
Yeah, the little GMC on the left was my truck.
Damn.
That was another show. That's an ex-US Air Force truck, that GMC. That was bought off a base at Lakenheath in Suffolk.
Oh, boy. Well, there's an irony.
And then she was taken out of military paint and painted a nice cream color with plum-colored wheels and brand new tires and new candy stripe upholstery and a new flatbed. Yeah, it was, had a lot of fun with that truck.
So, who doesn't love motorcycles? Of course, for many of us, it's, you hear your mother's voice in your ear, you kill yourself on that thing. Mm-hmm. But, for me, form follows function, and beauty is an expression of, form on a certain level. I think motorcycles, from the very earliest to the most modern, are beautiful machines. They radiate energy and power, romance, nostalgia. I certainly have my favorites, Indians and Harleys from the 20s to the 50s. What do you remember that moment, probably when you were very young, when you thought, I'm going to get one of those and I'm going to learn to ride it? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yes, very well.
What was that?
Sorry? Hello?
How old were you, and what were the circumstances that allowed you to get your first motorcycle?
Well, my first motorcycle, well, I think I got, I had a friend called Norman Campbell in Ireland, and his father worked for the Shell Oil Company at a refinery. And he went to work on a big old BSA motorcycle every morning, Mr. Campbell did. And I was walking home one afternoon, and he was on his way home from work, and he stopped and offered me a lift on the back of the motorcycle. And he got me on this lunchbox type little pillion seat that sat on the rear mudguard and roared off to bring me home. And I thought we were doing 1,000 miles an hour, but
of course,
we probably weren't doing any more than about 25 or 30 miles an hour because, those bikes in those days were not particularly fast, Peter.
Yeah.
And I thought, why? And the smell of petrol and the smell of the engine and it was just overpowering for me. And Norman and I would sneak in and have a look at his dad's bike while it was the hot engine cooling down and ticking over and this heady aroma of fuel. And I thought, right, I'm going there. And Norman's dad was also involved with motorcycle racing on the Isle of Man.
Ah, okay.
He used to bring us back all kinds of photographs and pictures. And I got the bug. And my first motorcycle, I bought it. It was a wreck, really, and it had a buckled rear wheel and a flat tire, and I think I got it for £7. This grand total, it's £7. It's a wonderful motorcycle. I had to push it home because it wouldn't start, and I was about 14 at the time, and but I did it up and got it on the road. And when I was 16, and I stuck my L plates up, or learner plates, and wobbled off down the road, because in those days you could teach yourself. And
Ralph, what kind of bike was it?
It was a little bike called a James. It was only a 197cc two-stroke thing. To me, it was brilliant at the time, And
Of course.
Yeah. And then I didn't have too many years before I kept it for quite some time. Got another little James, and then that was my last bike before I joined the military. And then in the military, I rode bikes there. And funny enough, when we'd come back to Malaya from Borneo on a rest and recuperation leave, I started a little motorcycle club with some of the lads. And we used to travel all over Malaysia at weekends, going to pretty places and beaches and things with this small motorcycle club. And I've ridden bikes ever since, right up until the last, probably I haven't ridden a bike for about a year now. I haven't ridden a bike in Ireland since I can relocate it. I'm getting a bit long in the tooth for high-speed jump. Yeah.
A question for you. In Southeast Asia, were you and your comrades, were there many people riding Royal Enfields?
Yes, quite a few.
Yeah. I ask because growing up, it was Harley Davidsons, and then ultimately the Japanese bikes started to come in. But it wasn't until I had a pack on my back and was traveling through Asia that I started to see these beautiful classic bikes, the Royal Enfield. And the further south in India that I pushed, the more of them that I saw. And at one point I was living on the beaches in Goa and learned that the Royal Enfield factory was in Mysore province. And I thought, that's about 2 days away. I could take a trip there and visit the factory. And it was a long-term camp-out situation with a number of other guys all watching out for each other and each other's gear. So off I went. And at this point, the way that, large animals are treated and the raised consciousness now, it's not something that I'm proud of or embarrassed about. It's just that to get from point A to point B, I had to ride an elephant in order to pick up my railhead connection. And I spent most of the day at the Royal Enfield factory. And of course, in my fantasies, it was, if I had the extra quid, I would have bought one. And well, of course, what easier way to get back to Europe and then ship it over? Didn't quite happen that way, but a wonderfully a fine motorcycle that we don't see here, obviously in the States for, at all. You started to race, though. You were a serious racer. I mean, you really were highly competitive.
Oh, we had a bit of fun out in Southeast Asia for a while. And it was a bit hairy racing a motorcycle out there because that was in the Isle of Man, that picture. That was during a charity ride for a couple of children's hospices. I had kind of organized this trip to the Isle of Man. Some of us were talking one night, and we said it'd be lovely to be in the Isle of Man, because that's the equivalent to Muslim people going to Mecca, going motorcycles.
Right. If you are a worshiper of the motorcycle, that is where you want to end up if you're in the UK, that's for sure.
And we thought it'd be nice to raise money for some unfortunate children, and have fun at the same time. So the idea was that that was our truck, our race transporter. And that was all the people who were sponsoring us. In fact, there's some
Bravo.
names.
But it all went to Children's Hospice. Bravo.
Every penny.
Oh, way to go.
Yeah. It was fun doing it. We spent 10 days on the Isle of Man. Now, there's a story, Peter. Ferry Bridge. If you go to the Isle of Man and you're going to ride a motorcycle around there, your first stop has to be Ferry Bridge. And you speak to the ferries and you ask the ferries for protection.
Wow.
And that usually works. But it's quite a poignant place, that, because where that little white bridge is, you can see the edge of there.
Yes.
There's a little river there. And around that river is some hawthorn trees. And on those hawthorn trees, there's the most heartbreaking tokens and notes into those trees.
Oh, my.
Where children are asking the fairies to cure their parents from all kinds of disease. It is quite heartbreaking to read it. But even the hardened motorcycle racers, when they go there, they go to Ferry Bridge and speak. That was one of my bikes that we rode over there, with a ton of equipment we took for backup, for tires, all kinds of tools. That was a Honda, 400 Honda I took with me.
And a very, very low-key looking one. You couldn't miss that 10 miles away. No,
that was a fun machine, that was. Fun machine.
Hey.
That's me and Grace. When we'd finished the charity ride, we're on our way on the ship back to the UK again, back to the mainland.
Right.
Yeah.
Does Grace ride as well, or did
no,
she?
She's not a big fan of motorcycles at all.
In other words, a sane woman.
It was really funny because when Grace and I got together and I met her, she put up with bikes, but I didn't realize that she was it's Rendlesham Forest. I didn't realize she didn't like them that much, and she very foolishly agreed to come with me on a motorcycle. So I thought, well, I'm riding sports bikes. I can't put the lady on a sports bike. She's not that happy. So I bought a big Honda Nighthawk, an ex-US model, actually, import from the States, and got a sissy bar and all on the back of it, stuck some panniers on it, and we lived in Norfolk at the time, so we rode off to Ireland on this huge Honda. and spent 2 weeks roaring around Ireland. And bless her, I didn't find out until later that she closed her eyes at every corner.
That's love.
Oh, bless her, yes.
Hey.
Betty Hill, bless her.
Yeah. Quite a gal. A very tough, smart woman who never backed down from anybody who would even look at her cross-eyed about the experience that she and Barney had had. And, you know, so many of us held her in the highest regard. I'm very glad that Kathy and she were increasingly close as she aged and ultimately passed.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. You know, I spent 2 days with that lady talking to her, and I never once asked her about her abduction.
Interesting.
Because you can understand why. I thought everyone in the world has quizzed and quizzed and quizzed.
Yeah.
I didn't have to quiz. I believed what happened to the lady.
And you were familiar with the particulars. I think that can be so refreshing to someone who is inundated by the same questions. It's like being a pop star and asked to sing your most famous song over and over and over again, rather than come into contact with somebody that you know is interested and knowledgeable, who has no desire other than to spend some time with you and not run that stuff again. So well done. Well done.
Yeah. It was just a privilege to spend the 2 days with her.
Yeah.
That's Kevin Swantz from Texas. He was world champion motorcycle rider. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to meet Kevin in Stafford in England and have dinner with him. And a thoroughly nice chap. That's me at the Rendlesham.
Yep.
Sitting there at the picnic table near the famous field.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about what brought you. I mean, you lived in Norfolk, which borders on Suffolk. Suffolk, of course, is the location of the Rendlesham Forest, which is the site and the surrounding area of the United Kingdom's best known and to a great degree best documented incident. Without the Rendlesham Forest incident, you and I would not be talking. We wouldn't know each other. We would have never met each other. Nope. And at a certain point, you had an opportunity to set up your work area in the forest, right there in the Rendlesham Forest. How did that come about?
Well, it came about. Two guys walked into my workshop in Norfolk one day, and they were looking for some help with something to do with vintage aircraft. And I said, well, where are you from? And they were from the fledgling Cold War Museum in Bentwaters.
Oh, sure. Yes. Up and running for some years now.
Yes. Well, this was in the early infancy days. And I said, I helped them. I can't even remember. I was aluminium I gave them or something like that, because they were trying to repair something on a exhibit. And we started talking, and they had a cup of coffee with me in the workshop, and they were saying where they came from and what they were doing. And they said, you know, they were very complimentary and appreciative of my work and my workshop. And they said, oh, we could do with you down in Suffolk. I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, we're on Bentwaters Airfield. And there are workshops there. Why don't you think about Bentwaters? And then, of course, I had already been avidly studying and reading all I could on the Rendlesham Forest incident.
Yes.
So I went down and saw the owners of Bentwaters Airfield and struck a deal to rent one of the hardened aircraft shelters.
Let me jump in here, number one, and ask you, do you remember the precise year that this happened?
that I went there.
Yes. When you rented that shelter.
I think it was around 2007.
We could have easily crossed paths. Folks should know that RAF Bentwaters, which went into existence during the Second World War and very quickly became the center of activity for the American Army Air Force, became the sister base to RAF Woodbridge. Some just 6 miles away tops. And RAF Woodbridge is still a functioning RAF base, very much so. Air Sea Rescue, space support for various spaceborne projects. But RAF Bentwaters was decommissioned some years ago and bought by a obviously fairly comfortable local family. And since then, it has been a location for film shoots, for independent businesses in the old hardened shelters that used to hold aircraft. I knew it quite well, coming and going from there. I think I've been to the UK more than 20 times. And finally, through a Canadian film team, my former co-author and I back then had an opportunity to get into the old nuclear weapons storage area, which, as you know, is quite an experience. I mean, the vibe there is very intense. And in fact, you have a photo of the watchtower.
Yes,
and that area was surrounded by double barbed wire with dogs, 24 hours, highly trained troops with automatic weapons, nuclear ordnance stored in that area. And at the end of the line of bunkers was a very nondescript kind of burnt orange square structure, very non-assuming. But for me, it was the most chilling structure, well, in a way that I've ever been in. That was the where the bioweapons were stored. Of course, it was completely against the Geneva Convention. Officially, we didn't have them. You didn't have them. But of course, we had them because, of course, officially, the Russians didn't have them, except that they did. And going into that structure and seeing some of the old stenciled warnings on, the walls, and know that that's where the anthrax and the other weaponized germ warfare was worked with, was quite an unforgettable day. That is the tower where the very first sightings that kicked off what became known as the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident were observed from. Oh, yeah. It's sort of like a ghost town now, isn't it, Ralph? Frozen in the 1970s, but very much a presence.
Incredibly so. The atmosphere on that place, you could cut it with a knife.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Now, that building, that's Woodbridge, where that building there, 510, that's a very intriguing building because it's a command post. It's similar to the one that the Cold War Museum have got over at the other side of the airfield.
Right.
Now, I believe there's 3 of those command posts because in the center of the airfield, there's another one that's identical. Now, that one, 510, is a pressurized building. They went into there, closed the door, pressurized it, and fought a nuclear war from there. Or at least they sent the airplanes to fight a nuclear war. And that, before I left Bentwaters, which was 2012, that building was refurbished.
Oh.
And it was operational. Now, the reason I've sent you a picture of that, because having the best part of 5 years to explore that place. I obviously did it with a with a view to trying to prove or disprove what we had heard from the U.S. Air Force personnel about the incident. And I don't truly know the truth of who actually was taken where. But I believe that someone were taken into that building 510. Because next door, the red brick building you can see just at the edge of the picture there.
Yeah, let me bring that up. And yes, exactly. I'm sorry, just to the extreme left, exactly.
Yeah, that building houses a room which had the seats bolted to the ground as described in various descriptions by U.S. Air Force personnel of a room they were brought into.
Mm.
The seats were bolted to the ground, and there was a large opaque screen in that room.
Mm.
And we all know the story about an alleged alien behind a large opaque screen.
Yep.
I think I found the screen. That particular room had a mass of cables and wires of a high degree coming up out of the floor, and they'd all been just chopped off when the U.S. Air Force left the place.
Mm.
So God only knows what electronic gear was in there. The opaque screen ended up in my workshop.
I was going to say, going into those buildings back in the day, it was quite shocking, some of the minutia and stuff that was simply deserted, of no intrinsic value, that simply stayed there. I will say that I left with a number of thises and that's, printed material, old signage, basically just held in that time warp from, as it's part of the military way of working. You ideally take what you are going to need, what you can reuse. Unfortunately, we have a big exception to that with the Americans in Afghanistan recently. But in bases, as they grow out of them, as the world situation changes, yes, they are like working ghost towns in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Woodbridge. That's the safe. That's Woodbridge approach lights.
Yep. Which
the UFO was supposedly damaged.
Yeah. In the case of Rendlesham, so much legend, myth, lore mixes so easily with the factual material. It's one of the reasons that it is such an incredibly complex case. And for reasons many people are aware of, after 9 years of intensive work on a book and then many years following up on the case, 5 years ago, I literally, and it's the only time it's ever happened to me in all of my decades in the world of UFO studies, burned out on this case. And I salute the people that continue to do the work. I have nothing but respect and admiration for the authentic witnesses who have had the courage to come forward and add to what we know. But it will always be, for me, and certainly for many others, a place where dream meets reality, fact meets fiction, legend meets reality. And that forest itself is a loaded piece of real estate. There is no question. It's, it's not like, the Area 51 kind of reality, or the wilder parts of the Southwest where there is a lot of over-the-top activity. But the Rendlesham Forest is a place I have gone many times, winter, summer, spring, and fall. Never at night. I mean, never at night alone.
Well, that's why I've got so much respect for my dear friend Brenda Butler,
Yeah.
because Brenda used to go in there by herself at night into those woods.
Oh, yeah.
And really, truly, like, most guys wouldn't have done that.
You know, Ralph, it's funny. Here we are. We could easily use this moment as a springboard to go into another 2 hours and just start to talk about our experiences, our take, Rendlesham Forest, the greater world of ufology, but we're out of time. I want to thank you, my dear friend, for staying with us. Is there any place where folks can get in touch with you, a website or any presence that you have online?
No, well, as you know, I got booted off Facebook for, I don't know what. I never did find out. I violated something, but whatever. I've never found out I violated. And I got angry. I thought, well, this is just censorship. Yeah. So I canceled my association with Facebook. But I could give you my email address if anyone wants to get hold of me.
They can contact me if you would like Ralph Hull's email address. Otherwise, Ralph, thank you so much again. Next week's guest is going to be America's leading UFO UAP archivist, the great David Marler. If you have enjoyed this show, please tell your friends. See you next week, same time, same station. Stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and be good to each other.